everyone. Welcome to week 4, day, I think it's 15 of Carrie's Corner, where we continue The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, illustrated by Eric Kincaid, where Frog's gonna listen. And we're starting at chapter 9, Like Summer Tempests Came His Tears. The rat put out a neat little brown paw, gripped Toad firmly by the scruff of the neck, and gave a great hoist and a pull, and the waterlogged Toad came up slowly but surely over the edge of the hole, till at last he stood safe and sound in the hall, streaked with mud and weed to be sure, and with the water streaming off him, but happy and high-spirited as of old, now that he found himself once more in the house of a friend, and he could lay aside a disguise that was unworthy of his position. "Oh, Ratty," he cried, "I've been through such times since I saw you last. You can't think. Such trials, such sufferings, and all so nobly borne. Then such escape, such disguises, such tricks, and all so cleverly planned and carried out. Been in prison, got out of it, of course. Been thrown into a canal." Here's this chapter. Been thrown into a canal, swam ashore, stole a horse, sold him for a large sum of money, humbugged everybody, made them all do exactly what I wanted. Oh, I am a smart Toad, and no mistake. What do you think of my last exploit was? Just hold on till I tell you." "Toad," said the water rat gravely and firmly, "you go upstairs at once and take off that old cotton rag that looks as if it might formerly belong to some washerwoman, and clean yourself thoroughly and put on some of my clothes, and try and come down looking like a gentleman if you can, for a more shabby, bedraggled, disreputable looking object that you are, I never set eyes on in my whole life. Now, stop swaggering and arguing and be off. I'll have something to say to you later." Toad was at first inclined to stop and do some talking back at him. He had had enough of being ordered about when he was in prison. However, he caught sight of himself in the mirror over the hat stand, with the black bonnet perched rakishly over one eye, and he changed his mind and went very quickly and humbly upstairs to the rat's dressing room. There he had a thorough wash and brush up, changed his clothes, and stood for a long time before the glass, looking at himself with pride and pleasure, and thinking what utter idiots all the people must have been to have ever mistaken him for one moment for a washerwoman. By the time he came down again, lunch was on the table, and very glad Toad was to see it, for he had been through some trying experiences and had taken much hard exercise since the excellent breakfast provided for him by the gypsy. While they ate, Toad told the rat of all his adventures, dwelling chiefly on his own cleverness and presence of mind in emergencies and cunning in tight places. But the more he talked and boasted, the more grave and silent the rat became. When at last Toad had talked himself to a standstill, there was silence for a while, and then the rat said, "Now, Toady, I don't want to give you pain after all you've been through already, but seriously, don't you see what an awful idiot you've been making of yourself? On your own admission, you've been handcuffed, imprisoned, starved, chased, terrified out of your life, insulted, jeered at, and shamefully flung into the water. By a woman, too. Where does the fun come in? And all because you need to go and steal a motor car? You know you've never had anything but trouble from motor cars from the moment you first set eyes on one. But if you will be mixed up with them, as you generally are, 5 minutes after you started, why steal them? Be a bankrupt for a change, if you've set your mind on it, but why choose to be a convict? When are you going to be sensible and think of your friends and try and be a credit to them? Do you suppose it's any pleasure to me, for instance, to hear animals saying as I go about, that I'm the fellow that keeps company with the jailbird?" Now, it was a very comforting point in Toad's character that he was a thoroughly good-hearted animal and never minded being told off by those who were his real friends. And even when most set upon a thing, he was always able to see the other side of the question. So although, while the rat was talking so seriously, he kept saying to himself mutinously, "But it was fun, though, and awful fun," and making strange suppressed noises inside of him, kick and pop, boop, boop, and other noise resembling stifled snorts or the opening of soda water bottles. Yet when the rat had quite finished, he heaved a deep sigh and said very nicely and humbly, "Quite right, Ratty. How sound you always are. Yes, I've been a conceited old fool. I can quite see that, but now I'm going to be a good Toad and not do it anymore. As for motor cars, I've not been at all so keen about them since my last ducking in that river of yours. The fact is, while I was hanging onto the edge of your hole and getting my breath, I had a sudden idea, a really brilliant idea connected with motorboats. There. Don't take on so and stamp and upset things. It was only an idea, and we won't talk any more about it now. We'll have our coffee and a smoke and a quiet chat, and then I'm going to stroll gently down to Toad Hall, get into the clothes of my own, and set things going again on the old lines. I've had enough of adventures. I shall lead a quiet, steady, respectable life, pottering about my property and improving it, and doing a little landscape gardening at times. There will always be a bit of dinner for my friends when they come to see me. All right, there are all the pictures. Him getting dressed back into Toadland. And I shall keep a pony chaise to jog about the country in, just as I used to do in good old days before I got restless and wanted to do things. Stroll gently down to Toad Hall, cried the rat, greatly excited. What are you talking about? Do you mean to say you haven't heard? Heard what? Said Toad, rather pale. Go on, Rat. Ratty, quick, don't spare me. What haven't I heard? Do you mean to tell me, shouted the rat, thumping with his little fist upon the table, that you've heard nothing about the stoats and the weasels? What? The wild wooders? Cried Toad, trembling in every limb. No, not a word. What have they been doing? And now they've been and taken Toad Hall? And how they've been and taken Toad Hall? Continued the rat. Toad leaned his elbows on the table and his chin on his paws, and a large tear welled up in each of his eyes, overflowed and splashed on the table. Plop, plop. Go on, Ratty, he murmured presently. Tell me all. The worst is over. I'm an animal again. I can bear it. When you got into that trouble of yours, said the rat slowly and impressively, I mean, when you disappeared for a time over that misunderstanding about a machine, you know. Toad merely nodded. Well, it was a good deal talked about down here, naturally, continued the rat. Not only along the riverside, but even in the wild wood. Animals took sides, as always happens. The river bankers stuck up for you and said you'd been wickedly treated, and there was no justice to be had in the land nowadays, but the wild woods animals said hard things and served you right, and it was time this sort of thing was stopped. And they went about saying you were done for this time. You would never come back again, never, never. Toad nodded once more, keeping silence. That's the sort of little beast they are, the rat went on. But Mole and Badger, they stuck out through thick and thin that you would come back again soon somehow. They didn't know exactly how, but somehow. Toad began to sit up in his chair again and to smirk a little. They argued from history, continued the rat. They said that no criminal laws have ever been known to win the day against cheek in a good case such as yours, combined with the power of a deep purse. So they arranged to move their things into Toad Hall and sleep there and keep it aired and have it all ready for you when you turned up. They didn't guess what was going to happen, of course. Still, they had their suspicions of the wild wood animals. Now, I come to the most painful and tragic part of my story. One dark night, it was a very dark night, and blowing hard too, and raining simply cats and dogs, a band of weasels armed to the teeth crept silently up the carriage drive to the front entrance. At the same time, a body of desperate ferrets, advancing through the kitchen garden, possessed themselves of the backyard and offices, while a company of skirmishing stoats who stopped at nothing occupied the conservatory and the billiard room and held the French windows opening onto the lawn. The Mole and the Badger were sitting by the fire in the smoking room, telling stories and suspecting nothing, for it wasn't a night for any animals to be out in, when those bloodthirsty villains broke down the doors and rushed in upon them from every side. They made the best fight they could, but what was the good? They were unarmed and taken by surprise, and what can two animals do against hundreds? They took and beat them severely with sticks, those two poor faithful creatures, and turned them out into the cold and the wet, with many insulting and uncalled for remarks. Here the unfeeling Toad broke into a snigger, and then pulled himself together and tried to look particularly solemn. And the wild wooders have been living in Toad Hall ever since, continued the rat, and going on simply anyhow, lying in bed half the day and breakfast at all hours, and the place is such a mess, I'm told, it's not fit to be seen. Eating your grub and drinking your drink and making bad jokes about you and singing vulgar songs about prisons and magistrates and policemen, horrid personal songs with no humor in them. And here's the pictures of all those things. And they're telling the tradespeople and everybody that they've come to stay for good. Oh, they have they? Said Toad, getting up and seizing a stick. I'll soon see about that. It's no good, Toad, called the rat after him. You'd better come back and sit down. You'd only get into trouble. But the Toad was off, and there was no holding him. He marched rapidly down the road, his stick over his shoulder, fuming and muttering to himself in his anger till he got near his front gate, when suddenly there popped up from behind the palings a long yellow ferret with a gun. "Who comes there?" said the ferret sharply. "Stuff and nonsense," said Toad very angrily. "What do you mean by talking to me like that? Come out of it at once or I'll—" The ferret never said a word, but he brought his gun up to his shoulder. Toad dropped flat in the road, and bang, a bullet whistled over his head. The startled Toad scrambled to his feet and scampered off down the road as hard as he could, and as he ran he heard the ferret laughing, and other horrid thin little laughs taking it up and carrying on the sound. He went back very crestfallen and told the water rat. "What did I tell you?" said the rat. "It's no good. They've got sentries posted and they're all armed. You must just wait." Still, Toad was not going to give in all at once, so he got off the boat and set off rowing up the river to where the garden front of Toad Hall came down to the waterside. Arriving within sight of his old home, he rested on his oars and looked around carefully. All seemed very peaceful and deserted and quiet. He could see the whole front of Toad Hall glowing in the evening sunshine, the pigeons settling by twos and threes along the straight line of the roof, the garden a blaze of flowers, the creek that led up to the boathouse, the little wooden bridge that crossed it, all tranquil, uninhabited, apparently waiting for his return. He would try the boathouse first, he thought. Very warily, he paddled up to the mouth of the creek and was just passing under the bridge when... Crash! What is the crash? A great stone dropped from above, smashed through the bottom of the boat. It filled and sank, and Toad found himself struggling in deep water. Looking up, he saw two stoats leaning over the bridge and watching him with great glee. "It'll be your head next time, Toady," they called out. The indignant Toad swam to shore, while the stoats laughed and laughed, supporting each other, and laughed again, till they nearly had two fits, that is, one fit each, of course. The Toad retraced his weary way on foot and related his disappointing experiences to the water rat once more. And that's where we're going to stop today's reading of The Wind and the Willows. Stay tuned tomorrow where we continue into this chapter. Like summer tempests came his tears. Will Toad rescue his hall? Stay tuned. See you tomorrow, not next week. See you tomorrow. Have a great day. Happy doing homework and having fun and playing games and reading stories. Bye. Bye.